The 30s had been a time of danger in Europe, as first Italy and then Germany had moved out to seize neighboring countries. As a result, in 1939, as the crisis escalated over Poland, the Soviets desperately sought to get Britain and France to agree to common war plans to fight together against German aggression. They got nowhere, and fearing that he would be left by himself to fight Hitler, Stalin cut a deal with Hitler instead. Germany and the Soviet Union divided Poland between them, Hitler turned to the West, and Stalin hoped to have until 1942 to rebuild his armies. And he figured this would be a safe bet because France, then considered the greatest military power in Europe, should hold up the Germans for some time. It did not work out like that. France fell in 6 weeks, and Stalin found himself facing German power alone on the continent.
On June 22, 1941, the Germans launched a massive invasion of the Soviet Union that involved over 300 divisions on a front over 1,000 miles wide. With the exception of a few air units remaining in France and Rommel's men in North Africa, the entire might of Germany's armed forces was thrown against the Red Army.
Operation Barbarossa is a smashing success for the Germans. In a matter of weeks, the German army makes tremendous operational incisions into Soviet territory. They encircle whole armies and more of the Red Army near the frontier. And within a few months, the Germans have taken 1 million prisoners. Nobody else's army could have sustained a beating of that sort and still been in the fight.
They were genuinely stunned when the Germans attacked in June of 41. And the first inkling was, but Moscow didn't say anything about this. Nobody told us to expect this. How could this happen?
The troops on the border could see the Germans getting more and more active across the way, and there was a great deal of alarm among the army on the frontier. But Stalin's interpretation of all the data that was being delivered to him was that this was a threat, that the Germans were going to make demands on the Soviet Union, which he could then negotiate and protract the negotiations, and if necessary, make major concessions just to win him the time to be ready to fight. The Soviets were also involved with the Germans on an economic basis. They had trade treaties that had the Soviets providing a great deal of oil and wheat to the Germans, and Stalin reasoned that the Germans could not easily do without this. Consequently, 4 days before the Germans attacked, an editorial appeared on the front page of Pravda saying all the rumors of bad relations between the Soviet Union and Germany are totally false and provocations being spread by somebody. We have excellent relations. There is no danger. Take it easy. And as a result, the armies did. Many veterans recount how there was a big letdown right then, a feeling, oh, okay, whatever's going on, the boss knows, it's cool. We don't have to be on our toes. And then the axe fell.
A month after the attack began, the Germans were nearly halfway to Moscow and had already captured a landmass twice the size of Germany. Yet, despite the beating it took, the Red Army refused to collapse. In fact, the Russians launched repeated counterattacks, and while few succeeded, they did threaten and slow the German drive as the good campaigning weather slipped away. In front of Moscow, the Red Army absorbed a staggering German blow and then, almost miraculously, launched an attack that developed into an all-out counteroffensive. The Soviets pushed the exhausted Germans back from the capital and close to the brink of destruction.
The German army was already worn out. Before they started the offensive, each division and Army Group Center had suffered an average of 4,000 to 5,000 casualties. That means most of their infantry were gone. They weren't getting replacements for them. The panzer strength, the tank strength had dropped dramatically in the panzer divisions. And when the first counterattack went in the 4th and 5th of December, the German front just collapsed. It fled back.
The Soviet counteroffensive at Moscow, following their ability to halt the Germans at the gates of Moscow, indicated that Germany could no longer win the war on its terms. And in all likelihood, Moscow indicated, foreordained that the war would end in defeat.
The Eastern Front would occupy the vast majority of Germany's armed forces and become the grave of the Wehrmacht and Hitler's ambitions. Across the globe, The Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor ended any debate on American military involvement.
I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
The country was at war, but not against the enemy the president wanted to fight.
FDR can't declare war on Germany. The American public just won't buy that. War against Japan, sure, they attacked us, but a lot of Americans still didn't want to fight Germany, and there was no reason to. Hitler has been very careful to avoid direct confrontation with the United States. He knows he doesn't want to fight America because he's already got a war with Russia, he's already got a war with Britain. It might have taken months or even years, perhaps, for us to get into the war against Germany, and instead, Hitler handed it to us. The Fuhrer decides to declare war.
With that single act, the entire strategic equation in Europe was altered in favor of Britain. Churchill rejoiced, saying, "We have just won the war."
It was most welcome news, certainly. With the backing of America, there was a chance now of unlimited supplies and manpower.
What had begun with aggression in Europe and Asia had now developed into a global war.
Clearly, the democracies of the Western world, including the United States, were threatened. So I was, of course, as nearly all Americans were, quite ready, I think, for the United States to get into the war.